All past victories have been won, and to try to win them again. So I ask you to charge into the breach with me, as many of our countrymen will follow us, armed only with the power of our ideas and the humble courage that comes in knowing that the good fight is always worth fighting. Ladies and gentlemen, we are a nation at war. It's not a war we created, but it's one we must finish. While our great nation was able to rescue Europe from the grasp of Nazism and communism, who will rescue us from the threat of Islamic extremists? It won't be Europe, where 20 million Muslims now live, where the largest mosque in the world is being built in London, where the most popular name for a male child is in Amsterdam and other cities is Mohammed, and where a terrorist bomb just went off, a terrorist act just went off today, of course, as you probably know, in Edinburgh. America is the last best hope, I say again, of Western civilization. Everything we are, everything we have achieved in this nation are under attack, from jihadism abroad to multiculturalism, radical multiculturalism at home. Our leaders are charged with the responsibility for defending our land, our culture, and our sovereignty refuse to do their jobs. Every generation of Americans must face a test, whether it was at Valley Forge, at Gettysburg, at Normandy, or on Flight 93. Whenever Americans see their country threatened or the flag failing, they act. It's their country. They built it. And that's the flag that they bled and died for. Will our generation muster the same courage and do the same? That's why I'm running for president. Because we are threatened. Because we need a leader. Because we cannot afford to fail. Because this is our culture. Fight for it. This is our flag. Pick it up. This is our country. Take it back. God bless you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm not sure how much time I have.
Congressman?
Yes, sir.
We've got about 10 minutes to clarify on some of the questions. You recall we sent you 6 questions a couple of weeks ago.
Yes, sir.
And I'd like to just run down these. I think you've made your opposition to tax increases clear, but I'm going to ask this specific. During your term as president, will you veto any increase of any tax, including individual income taxes, corporate income taxes, payroll taxes, and excise taxes, and use your veto power to ensure continuation of all the tax relief enacted since January 2001?
You bet your life I will. Absolutely. 100%.
And thank you for that definite answer. And number 2, on spending control. During your term as president, will you submit budgets to Congress that will freeze total non-defense discretionary spending for at least the first 2 fiscal years after the 2008 general election, and will restrict any increase thereafter to no more than the inflation rate? And will you veto any spending that exceeds this limit, and veto any bill that uses budgetary gimmicks, such as claiming non-emergency spending as emergency spending, or waiving budgetary rules restraining taxes and spending?
Absolutely, I will do so, and I have voted against every one of those little budgetary gimmicks that have been used. Again, I've got a record, and it's one I am happy to share with you. But it's also important to recognize something else about our ability, our need to actually control spending. Remember, you're talking about the power that the President has and the Congress has to deal with essentially 11 spending bills. These are the discretionary spending bills, but you have to understand that out of about a $3 trillion budget, that's only about a third of that amount really reside in these 11 spending bills. Most of that money is spent in what we call mandatory spending, and really it revolves around Social Security and also Medicare. Those are the biggest chunks. So you can squeeze that discretionary spending just as much as you want to. And I certainly have voted against almost every appropriations bill since I've been there. Defense and veterans, those are the 2 I can consistently vote for. But the rest I usually vote against. But you could do that. You can do that, but you will not accomplish the goal of reducing that deficit, because the deficit is really caused by those mandatory spending programs. And so what you have to do is try to get control of those. We need structural change in Social Security, structural change in Medicare, so that they do not become the great, you know that movie, there was a play, I think, Little Shop of Horrors, you know, and that plant kept growing, and it would only grow when you gave it blood, and it kept saying, feed me, you know, and it got bigger and bigger. Well, that's what the government is, that's what these programs are, and then the blood is your dollar, that's your tax dollar, and it just every day it just keeps saying, feed me, you know, and you really have no choice in these, quote, mandatory spending plans. You've got to change them structurally in order to get a handle on spending, really, and on that deficit.
And Congressman, I thank you for your very definite answer to our question, and then for going on to make clear the urgent need for entitlement reform and getting that thing under control. Now, the other tax question, this ought to be an easy one for you, because you did point out you're a co-sponsor of the fair tax. As president, will you sign the fair tax, currently H.R. 25, S-1025, into law if passed by Congress?
Well, of course I will. I mean, if I'm a co-sponsor, I think I'm pretty much, assured that I'm going to sign it into law. You know, I hope we really don't have the time necessarily to convince you of the benefits of moving to a fair tax, but I